So let's put a shine on something, shall we? What is polishing, really? Well, a good way to explain it is putting finer and finer and finer scratches into the surface of metal until we get either a satin shine all the way up to a mirror finish. So I've got a couple samples out here, and I'd like to start with more of the hand finishing. This Penny Bright is wonderful, but you can use it on copper and brass and bronze. You can even use it on stainless steel. It's not recommended for sterling or aluminum, but it comes with a little sponge inside, and you can dampen the sponge and it will just shine up everything from a penny, just like it says, Penny Bright, very quickly. So it's a little bit messier, but it's not bad. It just washes up right away with soap and water. And then you can buy a bunch of different products from polishing creams and use cloths, but I like something that's pre-treated. So Fire Mountain Gems and Beads carries these wonderful Moonshine cloths, and I love, love, love these. These come pre-treated. You don't need to mess with any messy creams. And when you work with them, you're just going to gently rub on the surface of your piece until you start removing that tarnish. And look at how that just shines up so beautifully. And it only takes a few seconds. Now, you're going to notice on your cloth that you're going to get a little of this tarnish over time. And this area of my cloth is still very usable, but when it gets black, then it's time to move on. So they're actually very economical because you've got a lot to work with here, and you've got both sides to work with. But when I travel, you know, sometimes a piece that I throw into my jewelry bag, it's not quite as pretty when it gets there. It could be exposed to some oxidation depending on the weather conditions and humidity. And there are also these Pro pads, and these are wonderful. These foam pads have a little bit more body or strength to them as far as when you want to get into crevices and cracks with your polishing tool. So these are also treated, and you would use them much the same way you would use your Moonshine cloth. And I'm going to just work on another surface. It can be a bench block or something else, but you might transfer a little of that tarnish, and I don't want to do that on my undersurface. But this is just going to hit the raised areas, and again, you're going to get this tarnish on here, and I can still work with that area quite a bit and still pick up a little of that oxidation until it just gets so black I can't use that area anymore. And with either my Moonshine cloth or my Pro pads, to get into crevices, I just can pick up a tool for really fine detail. It might be a needle tool at your workstation, or either one of these burnishing tools right here. You can use that to get down into corners and crevices and guide your polishing cloth where you might not be able to reach it with your fingertips. So wonderful tools to always have on your workbench and as you travel. But when we polish, let's talk about metals. So here's a piece of textured metal that I had prepared earlier, and this might be a component that becomes a part of an earring or a pendant. And you can see that even though I've removed fire scale, you don't see any black. And if you're not sure what fire scale is, look for a video on annealing. When you set heat to metal, you're going to discolor it, and that involves doing some pickle to remove the fire scale. But once the fire scale is removed, it's usually generally back to its original color, but over time it can tarnish like this did. There are different ways to seal your metal to help minimize or reduce tarnishing, but polishing can be done a number of ways to get a high shine. Now, you may have rough edges, so that's another aspect of polishing and finishing your work. So you can polish even to a mirror shine using wet dry sandpapers in different grits. Now, the lower the number, the grittier it is, the rougher the surface is. And wet dry sandpapers are a lapidary grade sandpaper. It's best to polish in water because that helps remove the grit, and you want to rinse frequently as you polish. I tend to cut my sandpapers in little tiny squares to make them easier to handle, and I can fold them over and get to the inside of rings. When I cut them up, I go ahead and I take a pencil or a pen and I mark the back of the grits. Now you can see these already indicate which grits they are. 600 grit is going to be pretty coarse. 2000 grit is very fine, and 1200 grit is somewhere in between. So you work your way up to the higher numbers, and the higher numbers mean that you get more shine. And you only need to go up to 2000 grit. Takes a lot of elbow grease, but you can get a mirror polish on metals Even without water you can do it, but it's better with water. Be sure to rinse your water frequently when you go through the grits because you don't want to reintroduce a coarser grit to a finer sandpaper because that's just going to put more scratches on your metal. Usually files come into play when I'm just trying to clean up or get edges ready to shine. But once you've cleaned your piece and maybe you've polished it to a point where it's nice and smooth, maybe you've used a tool. We'll talk about more automated methods, but you can see the surface of this wouldn't become reflective when I do this if I hadn't already polished it some way to a higher shine or introduced finer and finer scratches to it. But when I do handwork, a couple of tools I like are burnishers. And these generally are found with the metal clay tools, but these are great for sheet metals too, or other metal components that you might be working with. This is an agate burnisher, which is a stone, and it's got a nice sharp tip so you can get into detailed areas, but I often use the rounded bit on nice flat surfaces. The same thing here with a stainless steel burnisher. You can see it's got a nice tip on it, but it's got nice rounded smooth areas because I don't want to introduce lines into my work, but either one works pretty much on the same theory. When you compress and use as much strength as you can to go over an area, it's going to get shinier and shinier because you're really compacting those scratches and making it finer and finer on the surface so you get more of a reflective quality. And these work either the same as the other. It's usually just a preference of what you like to work with. I really like the agate burnisher, and when I do classes, sometimes people are a little afraid to really get in there with some elbow grease when they work on there. And I've never broken an agate burnisher in my life. I don't know, maybe it's possible, but I haven't had it happen. One of the places I like to use my agate burnisher when I polish, and I don't know if we can capture this on camera, the edge here, I'm just going to kind of angle it so we pick up some of the light refraction from different angles. I hope you can see that. Look at how much just pushing down on that just shined up and smoothed the edge right there. So polishing for me is a lot of fun because I really feel that's where I'm refining my work or taking care of my pieces. And I personally really enjoy the process, and I hope it's something you do too.